there has been a ongoing crisis within the American family for decades, but 2020 really accelerated that trend, in part because of political polarization. You saw families start to fracture based on ideological lines rather than them remaining a cohesive, nuclear family unit. The other element of this is the collapsing birth rate. Mm-hmm. And tying into that, before I do, here's the birth rate chart that goes all the way back to 1950. And you see that, I mean, we've just been plummeting since the 60s. Oh, I wonder what happened back then. Yeah. Right? And then it stabilized and recovered and then went back over 2% until about 2008. Look at that. And then COVID came along and it was like an all-time low. Yeah. And what's interesting is that it's rebounded since COVID, but not nearly to where it was.
Go to the rebound years that you're seeing, right?
We're at 1.79.
So yeah,
which is still below replacement.
Still below replacement, but
it's still below where.
Okay, wait, stop.
But look at 2020. What were we at 2020?
Go to 2020. Okay, now go to 2020. What 3? Okay, so 1.62 was I think the lowest it got, right? Yeah. And now you've seen a jump, and it's a significant jump, right? It's not where it needs to be, but it's a significant jump.
It's still below where it was in 2016, though.
Yeah, no question. I think the other thing that you saw is the thing what's happening with the family goes way back farther than 2020. And it started, again, there's a reason why the drop-off takes place in the 60s is because that's when, and look, I think Andrea did a wonderful job of explaining on the podcast that we did where we talked about this idea, was feminism ever a good idea, right? Is it just third and fourth wave feminism that was the problem, or were there problems with even the first wave? And her contention is that no, there were. It was baked into the system the entire way. I think she made a very, very good argument for why that's true. But the 60s is when it reached popularization levels within academia. It's also, and you need to understand, the sexual revolution was not just a feminist phenomenon. It also was a phenomenon with LGBTQ issues. You see this with Kinsey. You see this with John Money, where all of a sudden we weren't just talking about promiscuity and monogamy. All of a sudden it was this whole idea of sexual expression and identity was really starting to come under, going through a massive revolution. And the end result was, in many respects, is that it dissuaded people from wanting to have families. It significantly impacted birth control, abortion in 1973.
I was going to say birth control was approved by the FDA in 1960, but it didn't. It had to go through some Supreme Court stuff. So by 1965 is when it was the most widely available. And some states made it available in 1960, but then several states basically had to go through a Supreme Court decision. So birth control right there, that is what, for the most part, caused that, which I also think birth control is the reason why so many men are low testosterone, is because when women are on birth control, they're attracted to men with more effeminate features that are less masculine, and they basically breed with men who have lower testosterone, which also plays into the divorce rate, because when she chose you, she saw you as what she wanted. Then when she got off the birth control, she realized you were a weakling and she didn't want you, so she divorced you.
So that's a lot to unpack, and I'm not even going to try to do it in this episode. But
that's another episode, Tina, for another day.
To your point, and Nick's point as well, a lot of these trends have been going on before 2020, but you also brought up something really interesting, which is that a lot of these things fed into each other. So like the feminist movement, in many respects, propelled the LGBTQ movement, which eventually propelled transgenderism. Yeah. And out of all of this, there is one thing that is much more recent that you can absolutely point to and be like, no, this did not exist before 2020. And it's this. It's the fact that young men and women are now viewing each other as enemies, not as partners. The data here, the gulf between, particularly Zoomers, between Zoomer men and Zoomer women, young men and women, is just unprecedented in history. So if you scroll down here, this is what's so shocking. Yeah. The gender gap on Trump's job approval, and this is a very recent poll. This is from like a month or two ago. And it's showing that young women, 18 to 29, 24% approval rating. Deeply unpopular. Don't ask my sister what she thinks about Donald Trump. Yeah. And then young men, Well, I mean, it's 45%, which is, I mean, that's basically about average right now. It's a little bit below the national average, but young men are far more supportive of Donald Trump, and young women think he's literally Hitler.
Yeah.
And again, this is unprecedented because if you go back to when I was like 18 in the second Obama term, young men and women basically had the same approval rating on Obama. They all loved him, right?
Yeah.
You know, all the millennials back when I was young, you know, they all supported him. But now we're, 15 years into this, there is a gap that's emerging that was not around before. And I have a feeling that this gap has something to do with this, and it has something to do with the rise of feminism. And so you can go back to the 60s, but again, it's accelerated, I think, since 2020.
I think you're right. I think that the difference is that for starting in the 60s, really starting in the 50s, but really accelerating in the 60s and beyond, is the state was offered as the alternative to the husband and father. And
so are we now just at the consequence stage of this process?
I think we've been in the consequence stage for a while. The difference is that the way it was marketed before. The way it was marketed before was this idea that we're helping single mothers. We're helping women that found themselves in difficult situations. We're helping a woman leave an environment where she wasn't treated well or she was abused or whatever else there was, right? And so that marketing was that was not the sort of marketing that would push away men, right? Most men who want to be good men would look at that and be like, well, of course we want to help a woman not be in a bad situation. The marketing, though, for the last decade has been all men are bad, right? It's the patriarchy. It's unconscious bias. It's all these other things that are impacting the way, and it's all sourced back to men. And so this wasn't just a case of the state is a backup alternative to a husband or father when it doesn't work out. It is the state is your protector against men who would like to rule and dominate over you. That's their true, and that's what they really, I don't care what they tell you, that's what they really want. And the state is going to be the one that stands in the way to tell them they can't do that. And so, well, yeah, that's a completely different mindset, right? The state is no longer protecting women from the bad ones. They're all the bad ones. Well, at the same time that they were telling women this message, men were also getting the message. The difference was that at some point you had enough men reach critical mass and say, no, screw you. Like, well, the future is female. Good luck. Right? Why won't you open the door for me? What Tina's favorite thing, equal rights, equal lefts, right? Sounds horrible, but you raised a generation of men where you told them there's this one famous little TikTok thing where this woman is asking a young man to give up his seat, and he looks at her and he goes, "Are you pregnant or disabled?" "No." "Then stand." This is what you wanted. Right. And the thing is that 5 years ago, this is where the last 5 years comes into play. 5 years ago, men would have been flooding that screen going, "You're a douche, dude. Get up and give your seat to a lady." Now it's like, I guess this is what you wanted.
Chivalry is dead.
I guess, well, no. Okay, this is important. This is important. Because there's still a lot of men out there that it's not that chivalry is dead. It's that chivalry will now be given to the people who want chivalry, right? Tim Pool talked about this with freedom of speech, right? He goes, I used to say, I will protect anybody's right to freedom of speech. He goes, now I believe, if you believe in freedom of speech, I will protect your right of freedom of speech, which is to say, if you share that basic moral foundation of freedom of speech is important, then I will defend all day long your right to say things I disagree with. The moment you say I don't agree with freedom of speech, fine, I will respect your decision and not apply it toward you. It's the same thing with chivalry. It's not that chivalry is dead. Men have simply said the women who do not want chivalry will not be afforded any chivalry because it is the only way that those women will realize, oh crap, we really liked chivalry. And so there's a degree of this. There's an application of this principle, a limited, that's the important part, a limited application of this principle, which actually makes sense. Because sometimes people don't correct until they realize that what they thought they wanted is not what they actually wanted.